Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you this morning to our workshop on the topic how bioeconomy is transforming agriculture. My name is Regina Berner. I'm a professor at the University of Hohenheim in Stuttgart in Germany, and I'm here as a representative of the International Consortium on Applied Bioeconomy Research, the ICABR, that is an international network of researchers who are interested in the bioeconomy, agricultural biotechnology, and water development. It was established in 1998, and one of the tasks is to promote dialogue with stakeholders, with researchers on bioeconomy across continents. And it is really a great pleasure and a privilege to lead this workshop here today. The development of the bioeconomy, ladies and gentlemen, is influenced by two revolutions in science and technology. On the one hand, we have the biological revolution, caused by innovation in the biological sciences. And on the other hand, we have a digital revolution. And both revolutions have a wide range of applications in crop and livestock production. And they can thus enhance the productivity and the environmental sustainability of producing bio-based resources for the bioeconomy. But to what extent such innovations will indeed be applied, that depends on the way in which societies perceive these options and the policies and regulations they apply. And we are very happy that the Global Bioeconomy Summit brings together professionals and stakeholders from such a wide range of countries that represent quite different perspectives on these technologies. The expected outputs of our workshops are, first, the identification of the most promising biological and digital innovations that have the potential to transform agriculture and lead to more sustainable production of bio-based resources. And second, to identify the policies that promote these innovations, taking society's response to such innovations into account. I'm very happy, ladies and gentlemen, that 4 organizations and research consortia have joined forces with ICABR to organize this workshop. Their leaders will introduce now their perspectives in this plenary session, and then we will have a brief discussion. And I will introduce our colleagues prior to their presentations. And after this plenary, which will last for about 1 hour, each organization will lead its own parallel breakout session, each with very high caliber speakers and panelists. And you see the details on the program on the website. And in the afternoon, we will actually go at 4 o'clock Central European time back to this blue button room. But then immediately we will go again to the breakout sessions organized by the colleagues from the 4 organizations. And then in the end, from 5 to 6 Central European time, we will have a joint final panel where we bring together the perspectives of the breakout sessions. And we will report in the plenary of the Global Bioeconomy Summit on Friday from 3 to 4 Central European time. I would like to make you aware that all sessions will be recorded, and the recordings, both of the plenary and of our parallel sessions, will be made available on the conference website. We will first hear 4 presentations. We have planned a little bit of time for discussion in this plenary afterwards, and I would like to invite all of the participants to write your questions into the public chat while the speakers are presenting, and then we will take up as many questions as we are able to. All right, without further ado, I would like to move to the first presentation. We start here with the digital revolution, and I'm very happy to invite the first speaker, Professor Ulrich Schur. He is Director of Plant Sciences at the Institute of Bio and Geosciences in Forschungszentrum Jülich in Germany, and he represents PhenoRob Consortium, a large multidisciplinary consortium dealing with robotics and phenotyping for sustainable crop production. And the parallel session will be in breakout room 1 later. And now I would like to hand over to Uli. He will talk about the role of digital innovations in transforming agriculture. Over to you, Ulrich. We look forward to your presentation.
Thanks so much, Regina. I just see from the slide that this is the presentation which I do in the breakout session, which is on the slide now. So for the organizers, can you change that, or can I take over the role to share my screen?
Apologies for this mismatch.
Sorry.
Ulrich, can you share your screen instead?
I can share my screen. Yeah, I can share
to the right
screen.
of the camera.
No problem. Here. Okay, so do you see the screen now?
Yes, we see the screen. We see the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry for the mismatch. First, thanks very much for the opportunity to give this workshop here at the Global Bioeconomy Summit on the role of digital innovation in transforming agriculture, which I do for Forschungszentrum Jülich, but also for the Cluster of Excellence PhenoRob, which we do together with between Jülich and Bonn. The challenges which we have ahead in agriculture are numerous, and essentially we're facing two major parts. One is the environment, where we see more and more climate extremes, where we see water use and contamination issues coming up, and the strong decline in biodiversity, which also affects our environment. At the same time, we see a very strong increase in the demand, increase in food and non-food demands, which we're obviously also talking about bioeconomy in many cases. It's about also the quality and diversity which we have to deliver, and also the food waste is a big issue which we have to handle in bioeconomy as a whole. In order to address this, we know that there is not a single solution, but we need to have significant impact very soon. Therefore, we also need to address integrated land use management. We also have to look into the entire food, feed, non-food system in the whole context of a water, energy, agricultural nexus. And therefore, we have to build a circular agri and bioeconomy system as a whole within a bigger perspective. And we have two major options there in agriculture to increase yield and quality and to address these issues. One is breeding, and the other one is management. And in both cases, we have to decrease, with the breeding, we have to increase the potential yield or the potential quality. And with the management, we have to decrease inputs, fertilizer, chemicals, water. In order to achieve this, we have to have quantitative information about the plants, about a crop management system, about a whole food chain and the whole chain in context. And therefore, we need to understand, design, and manage based on quantitative data. And that's the opportunity which we have through our opportunity with digital innovation. This requires that we, on the one hand, develop digital technologies like monitoring, like robots, intervention systems. We have to include machine learning and data sciences in the whole process. But we have to also combine this with understanding our understanding of plants and soils and the entire management system, the crop management system. And then we have to integrate this into the quantitative information about environment and economy to see how we can assess the whole system, how we can model the whole system, and then how we can optimize implications. It's very important also for the workshop that we have different technology scales here. We have technology scales from large scale, like for example, remote sensing, like satellites, down to digital technology, which is down to your hand in your, for example, iPhone. And both of them also are addressing the question of where this digital innovation can become active on a global scale, on a local scale, but also on the scale of industrialized countries or countries where there is not such a high industry-based agriculture. And we want to analyze this in the workshop on digital innovation, where we're looking into how automation and hardware can change things, how software and data acquisition is affecting things, how data analysis and storage is affecting things, but also about how all this integration happens and what kind of implementation pathways do we have in order to make digital innovation available for agriculture and being an important part in transforming towards a sustainable bioeconomy. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ulrich. I think that was a great introduction. Sorry, I have a problem with the camera here. Just 1 second to be back with you. Just give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So thanks a lot, Ulrich. I think that was really a great introduction into the digital revolution and all the opportunities that they do actually present for us in improving environmental sustainability and productivity in the bioeconomy. Now, from the biological, we now move to, from the digital, we now move to the biological revolution. And it is my great pleasure now to invite our second speaker in this morning plenary session. And it is Privatdozentin Dr. Angela Sesic. She's the head of the competence unit of bioresources at the Center for Health and Bioresources of the Austrian Institute of Technology, AIT. And later, this group's breakout room is number 2. So later you can join this group in breakout room number 2. And I would like to invite Angela to give her a presentation on a very interesting aspect of the biological revolution, and that is our insights into the microbiome. So Angela will talk about the role of the microbiome-based innovations in agriculture and food systems. Angela, we are very happy you are here with us this morning, and over to you. We look forward to your presentation.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Regina, for the nice introduction. So I have the pleasure to talk about microbiome-based innovations in agriculture and food systems. And this is a very emerging field when it comes to applications in agriculture and food systems. And therefore, I would like to report about the coordination and support action, microbiome support, in which we exactly deal with this topic. So towards coordinated microbiome research and innovation activities in the food system to support international bioeconomy goals. So the food system, so it's not only about food production, it's about the whole system, the way food is produced and how it affects our health, well-being and the environment. So it ranges from primary production to food production to circular economy, waste recycling, and finally also to human health, for instance, human health in the gut. And microbiomes, as you will later see, play an important role in all these aspects. So in this coordinated coordination and support action, we are 29 partners from the EU, but also international partners, including, for instance, China, India, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, Brazil, China, Canada, and the US. And our aim is to identify and map microbiome activities, especially in the food system worldwide, so including programs, policies, facilities along the food chain and beyond. We aim to create a platform for scientists, regulatory experts, industry funding and policy organizations. Important is the definition of strategic research and innovation agendas to enable microbiome applications in the food sector, to enable collaboration and coordination in support of a sustainable bioeconomy, and to raise awareness and exchange of knowledge across scientific and political communities, including the International Bioeconomy Forum and the general public. Important are, of course, our partners, but we also have a broad range of advisory groups who play an important role in our projects. So they come from different sectors. So we have an industry advisory group, we have a funding and policy advisory group, a coordinators platform which comprises coordinators of European EU projects and initiatives, and an additional expert pool to really cover all the different expertises which are required. Just some highlights. So we, for instance, we have been very active in regard to mapping activities by having different types of workshops. We had a survey, we had bibliographic analysis, and just recently we released on our webpage the microbiome research database. So you can really look for different initiatives, projects, researchers, and so forth in our database. We also were active in publishing. So actually, we have just published already 3 papers. One was just published yesterday, and one is still in revision. And we have been very active in dissemination and outreach with different activities and initiatives. So microbiomes are everywhere in the food system. And on the one hand, of course, we have pathogens and diseases. So these are, of course, part of the microbiome which we want to avoid. But we have, in all environments, having very diverse microbial communities which play very important roles for ecosystem functioning. It is in water. We have microbiomes in the soil environment, in the plant environment, in the whole food production system. We have them in the human environment, of course. And we also have them with animals and all different types of ecosystems. They can be seen as a kind of a treasure when it comes to applications. So they are a treasure of different functions, production of enzymes, production of bioactive compounds. And these activities and functions can be used for various applications. So it can be, of course, for instance, for medical applications. Many nowadays used antibiotics and even other pharmaceuticals derive originally from microorganisms. They play an important role in any circular processes because they are very important for degrading recalcitrant compounds like lignins and other things. Or also degradation of xenobiotics is an important component of any bioremediation strategy. They play a very important in primary production. So they can be used as biofertilizers, they can be used as biopesticides, they can be used as agents to enhance plant stress tolerance, or also they can help as probiotics for animal production. They're very important also, of course, for the whole food production. So many food products are based off microbial activities. And it's also very important to note that these different ecosystems and environments are linked to each other via microbiomes or microbial activities. So if you use, for instance, animal feed which derives from a waste degradation process, this may affect the animal microbiome, for instance, of cows, and this will may also impact the quality of dairy products, which is again consumed by humans, and this may again have an impact on our human gut microbiome and consequently on our health. So there are a number of applications, and we know there are applications in medicine. We know them already a little bit better. It's, let's say, more new to have applications in the food systems or in agriculture. And it can range from how we treat our soils, how we, which kind of agricultural management practices are in place. But we can also apply microbial communities. We can apply individual inoculants or microbial strains, for instance, as biofertilizer or biocontrol agents. But they can be also included in a digital way, helping to perform more precision agriculture and to include microbiome applications or microbiome functions in these models and decisions. You will hear much more in detail about the individual possible applications in our breakout sessions. So we have a number of speakers talking about very fascinating applications. So I invite you to join our session. And with this, I would like to thank the team and of course also you for your interest and attention.
Well, and I would like to thank you, Angela, for a fascinating presentation. Introduce us to this very wide variation of applications of the microbiome. And I think there will be certainly a lot of interest. So please, if you want to learn more about it with a set of high caliber speakers on this topic, join breakout room number 2 after this session. And now we would like to move on to the question of how society deals with innovations. And I'm very happy that we can welcome here a colleague who is joining us from Malaysia. It is Dr. Mahalakshmi Arujanan, and she is the global coordinator of the International Service for the Acquisition of Agri-Biotech Applications, also known as the ISAAA. She is also the executive director of the Malaysian Biotechnology Information Center. And we are very happy here to have such a high-level speaker here with us this morning. It's morning in Germany, it's already later where you are, Maha. And Maha has been invited jointly by the ACABR, the consortium I introduced in the morning, and the Biomonitor group. And these two groups will have breakout sessions in the breakout room number 4. So Biomonitor is a major European research consortium monitoring the bioeconomy, and they will have the morning session of the breakout rooms number 4. And the ACABR will have the afternoon breakout session in room number 4, where Maha will actually join us kindly again. And now we look forward very much, Maha, to your presentation on biological innovations, societal responses, and regulatory challenges. The floor is yours. We look forward very much to your presentation, and welcome here, Maha, to the Global Bioeconomy Summit.
Thank you so much, Regina. It's very nice to be here. In fact, I just gave a talk at Thailand ASEAN Bioeconomy Summit, which is part of this global summit. So I'm very happy to speak about gene technologies and how they impact bioeconomy and also socio-economy, and covering what Regina was saying, the social impact and also the societal impact. So if, coming from the international services for the acquisition of agri-biotech applications, which is ISA, we have got hundreds of testimonies from farmers who really want the technology. And here is Maria Sueli from South Africa, and she says, BT Cotton Enterprise has been rewarding, enabling me to purchase tractors, cars, and house. And if we would even pay the sisters' education, this is not a new story for us. We have been working with farmers around the world, and many farmers tell us how biotech crops have put their children into college and education, which is in many countries, it is a far-fetched dream for farmers. So here is another farmer from Africa as well, from Kenya, and he says about fall armyworm. This is an emerging problem for farmers, and he says, I've lost 100% of his product, and he is just waiting for scientists to give a technology. So here, this is where we see farmers really want the technology and how this is going to impact socio-economic status of farmers. And, we'll also see how it's going to impact consumers as well. But while farmers in many countries are waiting for technologies, there are countries which has already moved forward. We have got 26 countries which has adopted legally, and they are currently commercially cultivating GM crops, and these are the main countries in the US, Brazil, Argentina. We've got 10 countries in Latin America, 9 countries in Asia Pacific, 2 in Northern America, which is US and Canada, 2 in EU, Spain and Portugal, and 3 in Africa, which is Sudan. Of course, South Africa comes first, and then Sudan and Eswatini. So these are the countries, and in 2018 there were already 191.7 hectares, millions of hectares of land cultivated with biotech crops. Now, ISA will be soon releasing the data for 2019, which we see very positive trend in adoption of GM crops as well. Now, whenever critics ask me or tell us that GM crops are not giving any benefits, we show them this data. Farmers are businessmen. If they don't see the benefits of adopting certain technology, whether it is seed or fertilizer or any technology, irrigation, they are not going to use the technology in the next season. But for this technology to be adopted year after year, it really clearly shows the impact, especially socioeconomic impact to farmers. And this is another one from Gramsbrook. From 1996 to 2018, we now have the latest as well. So what you say is here, increase in crop productivity. So farm income gain from 1996 to 2016 is US $186.1 billion. Now this is really big. So accumulated farm gain. How about the environment, conservation of biodiversity? We all know growing population of the global growing population, and to feed the growing population, we need to open up new land for agriculture. But with this technology, we can save 183 million hectares of land, because now the same land is going to give us higher productivity. So this is basically a land saving technology. Provide better environment, so it also provides sustainable farming, decreased herbicide. With herbicide tolerant, farmers are now using herbicide that is proven to be safe, and it has also increased pesticide so much. So that's about 8.4% in 1996 to 2016. Reduced carbon dioxide emission from various sources, from the fuel that's being used, from the spray, from no-till, because now carbon dioxide is not released from the land when farmers do not have to till their ground before sowing the seed. Now this accounts to 27.1 billion kilograms of carbon dioxide, which, if we want to really imagine, it is equivalent to removing 16.7 million cars off the road and keeping them idle for 1 year. That is the amount of carbon dioxide that's being saved. And so another socio-economic impact: help alleviate poverty and hunger among the poorest of all, among the resource poor farmers. So it has uplifted the lives of 16 to 17 million farmers. And not only farmers, it is also has got another effect on their families who rely on farming as livelihood. So in total, about 65 million people have benefited, and their and has uplifted their livelihood and social standing. So now we're moving from genetic modification. The narrative is now gene editing. So if we look at genetic modification or GM crops, these crops have been very farmer-centric traits, very agronomic traits, which is herbicide tolerant, herbicide resistant, pest resistant, and herbicide tolerant. But now with gene editing and the newer technologies, we are actually moving towards consumer benefits. And this is what the social impact of the new technologies. For example, golden rice is still a GMO, but golden rice, the benefits is directly to the consumers. Non-browning apple is directly to the consumers. It could be end consumers like us, or it could be retail consumers like the industry, F&B industry, those who do juice, those who do apple puree, and all these industry are now benefiting. Not only non-browning apple, but also the non-browning potato as well, and those potato with lesser acrylamide. Now, a research at University of Ghent reveals that consumers are willing to pay much more for GMOs if it comes with health benefits, with premiums ranging from 20 to 70%, which is really high. So this is where we need to change our narratives, even in our communication. When consumers see the benefits for them, directly for them, then they are willing to pay the price. So how do we change our communication narrative now, so that we show that the benefits are relevant to them? Because I always tell in my audience that we don't wake up, even all of us who are directly involved in biotechnology, we don't wake up in the morning and think about climate change and what the farmers are going to do. We think about the price of rice, we think about the price of wheat, which directly impact us. So this has to be, this is the changing narrative that we need to inform the convey to the audience as well. So looking at gene editing, it's going to be it's going to create another huge impact on socio-economic, job creation, and even in sustainable development. So the current global gene editing market is 5.1 billion, that's 2020, and the projected income or projected market value is in 2025 is 11.2. So this is with a compound annual growth rate of 17%. If we look at Asia Pacific, it's of course slightly smaller, but there's still a very good annual growth. So Asian Pacific gene editing market is 0.71 billion, and it is projected to grow to 1.47 billion with a growth of 15.66%. So there's huge market for this, and everyone is going into this technology. So, and another interesting thing is we see countries that was so unfriendly towards genetic modification, like Russia and Japan and Colombia, which is a country which started the negotiation for liability and redress in COP-MOP. Today, we see these countries are so eager to embrace gene editing. Russia joins in global gene editing bonanza. Genome editing food products to go on sale in Japan, despite of labeling and safety provisions, and in Colombia as well. So we are seeing more countries. Taiwan, for example, is coming into gene editing. They were not a player in genetic modification. So this is another interesting data. We look at the patents in gene editing. Who is the top? Of course, it used to be the US, but this is 2019, and China at that time, it was almost there catching up. Now we hear that the patent by China is far more than the patents by US in gene editing. And if we look at all the other countries, they are there. South Korea, for example, this is South Korea for technical implementation. So countries are all coming into gene editing. I think this is the best time to show that how this modern biotechnology is now playing a role. And this is from Argentina. If we look at GMO, 90% are foreign multinational. Now that it is complete shift when it comes to NBTs or new breeding technologies, where local companies have taken the huge share of the pie, followed by foreign SMEs. So local companies, smaller companies, and SMEs, even foreign companies are coming in, and here we see the multinational has become smaller. So this actually squashes the early critics of anti-gene technology people who said all this is going to support big companies. So gene editing is now changing all these things. Now GMO, we look at all what are the crops. Here, oil seeds becomes the big one in GMO. They're still the same in gene editing, but then other things now, animals and aquatic and all the other things are becoming bigger. So this, you see, now the pie is shared among many other sectors. So it's going to benefit many more sectors, many more areas, livestock, poultry, and aquaculture. So this is gene editing in animals, pigs resistant to respiratory syndrome, hornless cattle, which is for animal welfare, and allergen-free eggs. So we see this is where the pie that I showed, it's going into many new areas where gene modification was not there. So what are the hurdles? The biggest hurdle is actually the regulatory system. Now, in some countries, the regulatory system is really science-based, but in some countries, the system could be science-based, but the decisions are not science-based. And we see this in Europe so much that everything, even when it's safe, it is still rejected. So these are the problems. And the other problem is at the international level, where the international instruments that comes from the Convention of Biological Diversity, like Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing, which is really restricting the emerging technologies, which is synthetic biology and gene editing. So there is a term called digital sequence information, which is really very vague. What is a digital sequence information? Is it a proton? Is it a protein? Is it RNA? Is it a DNA? Basically, anything can come under that. So if we restrict that, then it basically ties the scientists' hands so much that they can't move around and do many things. So the other hurdle is also the communication narratives. As I said, communication narratives has to change. We have to bring in new stories. But when I say stories, these are not fictional. These are the real stories and how it's going to impact people, consumers, the planet. Scientists now cannot be the bystander anymore. Scientists have to move on and actively involve in communication, in policies and regulations. I go to the COP meetings every year and we see lawyers and policy making taking the stage. We need more scientists in this negotiation. So these are the hurdles that we need to change. So the takeaway message is we need more tools in our toolkit, both the new ones and the old ones. We need to change the narratives and we need more South-South collaboration, harmonization of regulations among all countries, and communication dialogues, outreach programs, and all these also for opportunities for job creation. Finally, I would like to say ISA is heavily involved in all these things, outreach program and capacity building. So we'll be very happy to support any countries who wants to go into this. During the lockdown, until now, we were actively doing webinars, and we have reached out to more than 65 or 7, almost 67,000 people. And ISA also changing our roles to be more inclusive, based on trust and transparency. So we are going beyond crops to biosciences, like what the previous speaker was presenting on crops on microbiome. So we are going into this. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maha, for this really passionate and very interesting presentation on, I think now my camera is frozen, sorry for that, just a second. So for this really very interesting presentation, and we will hear more about it in the afternoon session in breakout room number 4. I think we all got a lot of food for thought from your presentation. We already have some questions in the chat, and since we are good in time, I think after this we will also have room for more discussion here in our plenary. So thank you very much. If we would be in the real audience, we could all clap, but so feel yourself appreciated. And we now move on to our next speaker. And just 1 second, let's see whether I find the camera again here. Okay, so it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Monika Schreiner. Monika is the head of the Department of Plant Quality and Food Security at the Leibniz Institute of Vegetable and Ornamental Crops, IGZ, and she represents the research consortium Agricultural Systems for the Future, which she will also introduce as part of her presentation. And this group will actually meet in the breakout rooms number 3. So if you are interested in that topic, breakout group number 3 later. And now I would like to invite Monika to talk about what is needed to foster the transformation in agriculture. Monika, we are very happy you're here with us this morning, and over to you.
Yes, many thanks, Regina. And also many thanks to the organizers giving us the opportunity to present here at the Global Bioeconomy Summit our vision of agricultural systems of the future. And in contrast to the previous speakers, we are focusing more on a general view on the bioeconomy's impact on agriculture. And in our workshop, which now will follow, we are highlighting the latest research and innovation approaches, and we discuss with several experts really what is needed to foster transformation in agriculture. And yes, even if the outcome of COP25 was not really convincing, and also achieving the goals of a Paris Agreement is still uncertain. There are some political decisions already done and in political course settings in in the direction of a green recovery. That is done with the establishment of the European Green Deal, with its farm to fork strategy, with the biodiversity strategy, or with the new circular economy action plan, just to mention a few. And with that, the EU clearly demonstrates that it wants to take a leading role in a greener and healthier agriculture. And that is where our initiative, Agricultural Systems of the Future, comes into the play. Here, we would like to work on how do we have to shape agriculture for tomorrow, for the future, and how could we do agriculture more sustainable. Agricultural systems of the future. This comprises of 8 project consortia. It's funded by the German Ministry of Education and Research, and we unite a broad range of complementary expertise from life science, social science, environmental science till engineering. And we all would like to rethink agricultural systems complete in a new way for developing or by developing disruptive innovations. In this systematic approach, we are using high technology such as smart farming or human-machine interactions. We are establishing location-independent, space-efficient farming systems and combining that with alternative organisms for new food sources. And also we analyze nutrient and energy fluxes for establishing complete circular systems. And all these 8 consortia share one vision. And our vision is, or are, climate neutral agricultural systems for a sustainable agriculture and for a sustainable, healthy human diet. And having this vision in mind, we could draw up a future scenario. And that future scenario shows that even almost exclusively now the focus is on more yield and on cash crops, and that will be replaced by regional, location adapted, mostly indigenous plant diversity in various intercropping systems with mixed cultivation. And the promotion of biodiversity and the promotion of services that will be always included in all management decisions in respect to agriculture. And autonomous and networked agbots or drones will do smart farming in crop production as well as in animal husbandry. And augmented reality will be the machine standard. Thus, grazing with intelligent virtual herding technologies will displace completely intensive livestock farming. And that this development will be supported by the creation of a wide range of protein alternatives, such as artificial meat or indigenous protein plants, or the use of marine organisms such as fish, jellyfish, or algae, or the use of proteins of various insects. And also nutrients, thermal energy, CO2, will be completely recirculated from bio-waste or wastewater. And as agriculture takes more and more place in city quarters, close to the consumer, new circular agricultural systems will be established. So with that future scenario in mind, We would like to thank you for your attention, and we're really looking forward to see you in our workshop and to discuss with you all what is needed to foster the transformation in agriculture. Okay, many thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Monica. I think this is really a very interesting and exciting vision about the future, and I'm sure many of our participants in this workshop will be very excited to join you in the breakout room number 3 to further discuss this very interesting option. So thanks a lot, Monica, for this presentation. And with that, we are actually at the end of the presentations, and we do still have 10 minutes for a joint discussion before we move to the breakout rooms. And I have seen quite a number of very interesting questions already in the chat. And I would like to start with the first question that was actually directed to the digitalization presentation of Uli. Uli, sure, maybe you can come back with us on camera again. That would be nice if you could do that. Jan Starke has asked, what is the role of digitalization in demand side options? Uli, over to you.
Thanks very much, Jan, for that question. I think it's a very important question that we not only look at the production level, but also on the demand side, what digitalization can deliver there. I think there are many things there. On the one hand, we have options today where consumers can also look at how prices can develop through digital technology. A number of very nice auction options there, which where people, for example, can pay more or less for certain ways how sustainable agriculture is done. That's a very nice opportunity. Now, obviously, also in the consumer sector, we have quite a lot of options there to use digitalization. If you think about food waste, there's a lot of options there for digitalization. And there could also be other areas where we have quite a lot of digitalization options already running today. So I think there are many options there for the demand side, and also not only for the demand, but also for the circular economy part, where some biomass which is there can also be negotiated into other use cases for others who need biomass. So there's quite a lot of options there which we can do there.
Thank you, Ulrich. I think Lena came on camera. Lena is one of the speakers in the parallel sessions. Maybe, Lena, you would like to ask a question directly? I think Lena made a comment on the upgrading of side streams that we are now wasting. Maybe you'd like to...
Yeah, thank you so much, Ulrich. Excellent presentation. And I just want to stress, and I think you almost covered here, that there will be a lot of need for new digital solutions for keeping track of circular use of all what we are now wasting. And that's both in the food system and feed system, but also non-food, because a lot of the residues from non-food can also be turned into food by now. Even, for instance, we can grow in fungi on residues, but we need more digital keeping track of the different types of streams in our societies. And then also to keep track of contaminations and other part of problems.
Thank you, Lena. Uli, you would like to comment on this aspect of digitalization in the circular economy?
Full agreement. This also includes, obviously, also labeling issues or tracking issues. There are a lot of opportunities here for digitalization in the entire chain or the networks which we actually building in Bioeconomy. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And there is the opportunity to further discuss this in the breakout session on digitalization, where you can join Uli in a few minutes. We also have some questions to Maha. Maybe Maha, I would be happy if you could come back on camera. We actually have 3 questions for you. Let me bundle them. So Jorge Celare asks, Maha, isn't it debatable whether biotech crops are land saving technologies? It is well documented, he says, in the literature that egg intensification does not necessarily lead to land sparing. In your opinion, which governance mechanisms should be in place to ensure that land sparing occurs? So that was the first question. The second question by Carlos Seri was, Maha, what is driving the differences in business scale between GMOs, largely big corporations, and gene editing, opportunities for small corporations. And a third question we also had, Maha, it is from Nicolas Sarmiento Sierra. Nicolas asks, this is interesting data about gene tech that you presented. Are there secondary effects of using such technologies? Maybe just a short answer on these big questions now, and further discussion opportunities in the afternoon session. Over to you, Maha.
Yeah, sure. I think the first question on land saving, this is certainly a land saving technology, but farmers might not want to open up new land for crops and then produce too much if there's no market demand. We all see farmers in many countries who switch from corn to something else when corn market drops. So I still think it is a land saving technologies, as farmers will do what is required by the the market. Now, to Carlos' question on what's driving a difference in business, it is number one is the regulatory factor. So when the regulation it doesn't require too much of cost, and then the smaller companies are coming into the space. And the other questions, secondary effects of such technologies. Now, gene technology, gene editing it is also something like genetic modification, except for it just uses a different approach. So, but the risks are also all well evaluated in the lab. I think that's the short answer to those questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Maha, for answering these questions and further opportunities to discuss with Maha, who is joining us from Malaysia later. And we also have questions to Monica. Maybe Monica, you would also like to come back on screen. We had questions from Anne Bogdansky from the FAO. She has actually also commented on the microbiome question and sent a link in the chat. And she has been asking the question, dear Monica, fascinating insights in the future. Thank you. How do you assess the potential of insect-based protein alternatives for feed in the next 10 years or so? Monica,
yeah. For my opinion, the potential is great, because insects could turn bio waste and protein sources, which are very high with high value. And I think this protein could not only be used for the human diet, it could be used as feed, and which really is a big market for pet food. So really, I think, especially in Europe, it's a great market for the next years.
Okay, thank you so much, Monica, for sharing this. And again, there's also further opportunities to actually discuss with Monica in breakout room number 3, where there are also, as in the other groups, a range of very interesting speakers. And I think that I see no further questions in the chat, so I think we can actually start the process of moving into the breakout groups. I'm sure after this fascinating set of presentations, you may have difficulties to choose which room, but I would like to ask, or they have already brought it up. So here you see again now the Zoom links. You can just click on the link and get to the sessions. So breakout room number 1, digital agriculture for sustainable production, led by Ulrich Schur and his team over there. Then we have breakout room number 2, microbiomes for the bioeconomy, hype or hope. And then we have breakout room number 3 with Monica and team on what is needed to foster the transformation in agriculture. And in breakout room 4 in the morning session, we have the Biomonitor group. And this Biomonitor group, this research consortium, will discuss how to implement bioeconomy strategies around the globe, learning for success. So I would like to invite you to join these breakout groups. You will meet our colleagues there. You will meet more speakers on these fascinating topics there. You have the opportunity to discuss there. All breakout groups will be recorded. So if you have difficulties to choose, don't worry. You will still have the opportunity to listen what you missed later in the recording.
So I would, good morning. I would suggest we start our session then looking at the time. So first of all, Uli sends his apologies. He has unfortunately a conflicting meeting right now, and so he asked me to fill in and moderate the first session. So there would be two parts. The session is divided into two parts. The first part of this breakout session is this morning, and then in the afternoon, the second part. The idea is to discuss about digital agriculture for sustainable production. There will be 3 presentations to set the scene. So we are doing this because we're coming from the research center Jülich. We are interested in developing, applying software, hardware solutions to understand plant environment interaction and transfer this into application. And as such, using of digital agriculture is one of the key core questions for us. And we also managed to get key speakers in this involved working in this area. For the session now, we will have roughly 8 minutes for every speaker to introduce their topic. So the first speaker will be Michelle Watt from the University of Melbourne, talking about below ground challenges. The second speaker will be David Hahn from Phenotrade, talking about the difference between digital and in the end making meaning from digital, so smart agriculture. And finally, Uwe Rasche from the Research Center Jülich will talk about exploiting synergies across scales, talking about scales from single plants to entire fields, from ground-based to satellite-based measurements. And as such, may I ask you, Michelle, to start to give your presentation. I hope you can share the screen, and you are welcome to talk about your below ground world.
Okay, no problem. I just
or would you like me to share the presentation?
Yeah, I can actually do it. It's probably easier. I thought the organizers were going to share it, but I actually have it here, which is great. And I will share it right now. I'm going to focus on what I see as the most important challenge for this century in agricultural technologies, and that is the quantification of carbon and water and nitrogen below ground. And I'm going to go through the talk really giving 3 reasons and opportunities about why this is such a critical challenge that I think the new digital technologies can address. So below ground in the soil underneath our feet, this is filled with the roots of plants and their associated microbiomes, the microorganisms that are associated with the roots and obtaining carbon that's been fixed in photosynthesis above ground, goes below ground. And this very significant carbon pool, terrestrial carbon pool, is so far unmeasured. So we have this large part of terrestrial carbon going below ground, and it's been very, very difficult to quantify and measure. And I'm going to give 2 critical examples of where it's not included so far in both models and in estimating yield gaps. So as I highlighted, I mean, the really critical thing is that carbon is fixed in the leaves of all plants in photosynthesis, and a portion of it stays above ground in the leaves and the seeds and the flowers and the harvested products above ground, but a very large part of that carbon goes below ground into the roots and then out into the soil. The roots then in turn return water and nutrients up to the leaves to build biomass. And for over 100 years, we've had a problem quantifying this below ground, these below ground processes. A brief history of the story of crop improvement and climate change concepts. And essentially the history has been one of avoiding directly measuring the root carbon, water, and fertilizer below ground because of the challenges associated with these measurements. And what I want to show in this timeline, I'm not going to go through it in detail, is that we have had last century a series of experiments and key sort of phenomenological concepts that have come together to basically arrive at a way that plants are modeled, measured and modeled. And most of the global models for agriculture and also for climate estimates have a very round number of 25% of the plant biomass going below ground into roots. And the actual measurements for this number originated from weighing of the root systems back in the 1960s. And really largely based on the Farquhar-von-Kammerer model, some critical produced by Sinclair and others related to radiation, water, and photosynthesis, we have been estimating below ground based on above ground. We have not been directly measuring it. Sorry. So what I'm going to show just briefly in this slide here is a selection of measurements that were actually done of below ground biomass from both field and pot experiments on the crop wheat. Wheat is one of the largest and most important crop for food security, and it's the most widely grown geographically on the globe. And these actual measurements show a very wide range of carbon below ground biomass and associated compounds going below ground from 3% all the way to 69%. A mean of these actual measurements, more recent measurements, is 41%. And really the message here is that we can do a much better job of estimating and quantifying below ground carbon compared to this number we're using from the 1960s with today's new technologies and even more new technologies that can be developed. The second point that I'm going to make about this below ground biomass and carbon is that yield gap estimates, these are used to estimate where yield gains can be made globally, do not include root and microbiome biomass. So basically in this image here, this is a standard grass crop. Typically what is done is that the components of the crop are divided into what's called a yield identity, which is the amount of resource used times the biomass that's produced with that resource times the harvest index, the amount of biomass that goes into the grain. And this identity and the yield gaps are used to see where we can make new innovations, and they do not currently include below ground carbon. Sorry. Okay, and here in this figure is just an illustrative graph of what is a yield gap. So yield gap analyses are central to global investments. And it really is important that we include below ground processes in these analyses. And a yield gap is shown by plotting the resource that's critical to the analysis, soil, water, nutrients, or radiation, for example, or even land, against the yield that's achieved for that amount of resource. There's a boundary line for the potential that can be achieved depending on the crop and the genotype. And basically, this boundary line can be moved up, either with more yield because of the roots functioning better resource efficiency because of the roots capturing more water, or increased carbon sequestration. Now, finally, I'm going to say that new technologies can be used to better estimate this below ground biomass and carbon across the globe. today, in a recent review, we showed all of the technologies that have been tested so far historically to estimate below ground biomass and carbon and measure it directly. These extend all the way along the electromagnetic radiation spectrum. Some of them can only work in the lab, could be transferred to the field, and some of them can work in the field, but very poorly for non-invasive measurements. They're very low resolution. For field estimations, we rely on either digging or coring the roots, imaging them in a window below ground, or indirect measurements by measuring canopy. And with initiatives that are going on with agricultural technologies, these are digital and robotic technologies, advancements in sensors. I really believe that we're going to be able to advance below ground quantification this century. And this is probably going to be able to be achieved through a hybrid of very high resolution phenotyping technologies used in controlled environments and field technologies. The advantage is that sensors used in the controlled environment and lab experiments often are similar to the sensors that are actually used in the field. And I think Uwe will highlight this. And Uli Schur, along with colleagues in the University of Bonn in the DFG Excellence Cluster, really are focusing on this challenge of getting digital technologies used in this century. And with that, I just want to thank my colleagues, past at CSIRO, and most recently at the Jülich Forschungszentrum, and now my colleagues at the University of Melbourne. Thanks, Roland.
Thanks, Michelle, for the fascinating below ground world. I would suggest we move on now to David Hahn from Phenotrade to introduce digital and smart agriculture. Can you present? So may I also ask the participants, if you have any questions, put those questions into the chat. We will address them at the end. The goal is to have now half an hour presentation setting the scene, and in the end have some time to discuss. And your questions should also be addressed. But David, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Roland. Thank you, Uli, to give me the chance to present my opinion for digital agriculture and smart agriculture. My talk will be how far is it between digital and smart agriculture. So as we all know, we have a global population booming. We will increase our population into 10 billion in 30 years. So we need more food, but we only have limited farmland. So we need to have higher yield. And also we have people become more wealthy, middle class increasing, so people need to eat more meat, more protein. And also the population was aging and birth rate decreasing. You can see here that in China, the agriculture, the farmers' age was rather high, so it's very serious aging trends, and also the education level was rather low. So, which means we need more robots in future 20 or 30 years, and we meet very serious climate changing. The past 5 years have the top five high temperature since 1880. So we need to have more stress tolerance, stress tolerated plants. And we need environmental sustainability. So we need to we hope to import less chemicals to our farmlands. And this year we all met a pandemic. So many farmers, many breeders hope to remote monitor their crops and do the management automatically. So the agriculture faces challenges, and what we need is to make the agriculture more digitalization, more smart. For digitalization in past 30, 40 years, we can collect a lot of climate data, soil data, and in past 15 years, the technology to collecting plant data developed very quickly, which was called plant phenotyping or plant phenomics. So we can collect the plant phenotyping data now, and other omics data like genomics data was very cheap, and we can collect a huge amount of sociological data. So, and all this data was coming from different sensors, different sources with different format. So we hope to use this data to make the best model. So we have the modeling process. We need the artificial intelligence to be involved, but modeling is not the end. Our purpose is to make a smart decision. This is what we call smart agriculture. But after make the smart decision, we hope to have smart breeding, smart sowing, then go to fertilization, smart spraying, irrigation, weeding, and harvest. But that's not the end. Then we go to the downstream industry trend. But this is not the last. Because agriculture is part of the society, it's part of the market, part of the our world. So we hope to have the very smart decision for policy making, price making, economy, insurance, and also financial features. So, and all this data, all this generated data will go back to the database, and then to improve the models and improve our decisions. So in all this process, the key is the decision-making process. In order to make the decision-making process, in order to coming from digital agriculture to smart agriculture, we need to collect huge amount of plant phenotyping information, especially in field. So we can see that obtain plant phenotype information, especially in field, is one of the key bottleneck of the smart agriculture. So here we give 3 examples which was widely used all over the world. The first one is data services. We all know that there are many companies who offer field climate data services. They collect data from weather stations, and they handling the data, they modeling, they provide services to farmers. But most of the climate stations in field, they lack the crop information, lack the images, or lack the NDVI or chlorophyll information. And some other companies, they collect the satellite information, they process in modeling, and also do similar service. But satellite images can cover large scale crops, but they only have very low resolution. They cannot arrive the resolution we needed. Another example is for UAV planting protection. There are so many drones used widely in the world, especially in China. In past, the big farmers, they purchase drones. Nowadays, they buy services. But most of the drones, they have cameras, but they cannot handle the images instantaneously. And handling images instantaneously, getting the phenotype information and making the smart decision is very important for the precise or smart plant protection. And the third example is agricultural machinery. This is a very major and huge amount market. They have very high technology now, and a lot of machines have GPS navigation systems. What my question is, can we add more sensors, imaging sensors or spectral sensors into these machines to collect crop phenotyping information? And can we do the instantaneous imaging processing and decision making in process in future? If we can do this, may be very useful for future agriculture. So from all these examples, we can see that plant phenotyping is very important, is one of the key process or key bottleneck. While plant phenotyping need multidisciplinary collaboration, we need engineers, we need scientists, plant science, or breeding, or genetics, we need mathematics, we need computer sciences, different disciplinaries to be involved. we need more international cooperations. There are so many plant phenotyping networks in the world that do very well. And we also need more connections between academia and the industry. As I know that there are many research organizations invest a lot of money to research or develop the technologies which was already existed in industry. I think this is waste of money. And also, we need more open discussions and collaborations between different stakeholders and actors. So different stakeholders and actors, they have their roles, their purpose, their benefits. Sometimes they are not very open to share information or very open for discussions. We hope in future we can have more open discussions. And also, the last point is the development of AI and the instantaneous computing ability will accelerate this process, because only if we can make the instantaneous decision in field, in drones or in the machines in field, we can go to a really smart agriculture. Okay, this is my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, David. Thanks for the very nice presentation about digital agriculture. So we would move on now to Uwe and to make a journey how to assess plants across scales. So Uwe, the stage is yours. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Roland. And David, can you stop sharing your screen and then I can put up my slides, please?
Yes, I'm trying. Sorry.
No worries.
What happened?
Yeah, so thanks, Roland, and thanks, Uli, for inviting me here. I'm also working at the Forschungszentrum Jülich, and I also are affiliated with the University of Bonn at the agricultural faculty there. And for today, for the next 8 minutes, as Roland already said, I would like to talk about scales in measuring plant functions. And I would like to give you a journey from really the plots or the single plants up to the satellites. And by doing so, I would like to pick up some of the thoughts which were already prepared by David's talk. And for the start, just some images which I stole from web pages where different visions of digital agriculture or future agriculture are shown. And this all has to do with satellites, with drones, with smart machines on the grounds, and a lot of farmers which are being made available online to the farmer at the end. And if I try to actually sort this a little bit and to organize this a little bit, if I think about what elements are actually currently undergoing this technical revolution, I could come down to say, on the one hand, we are working a lot, or we have worked a lot on the sensors itself. We have developed in the past years novel sensors, like here in this case, an active fluorescence sensor, which can look into plants online while being on the field and to derive information about the structure and the function of the plants, which is unprecedented. However, speaking about novel sensors, I made my life easier because I'm mainly focusing on the above ground part, which is easier to be accessible. And I totally agree of what Michelle said. The below ground part is the challenging part actually to measure and to sense with our technology. Second aspect where we experience a technical revolution or have experienced a technical revolution is in positioning platforms. We have drones, unmanned aircrafts, which can fly easily and are cheap to be employed in agricultural production pretty straightforwardly. And third one, the robots which have been mentioned. There was a technical revolution of commercial robots which are now already available for the market, but also experimental platforms. And this is a picture of our experimental platform, which we further develop in the Excellence Cluster PhenoRob, where we test new measurement modes, where we test new navigation modes and sensor integration. But also on the robotics side, there's quite a lot of technical development having been happened in the past years. And last but not least, fourth pillar, all these elements nowadays can be linked based on the revolution which we have with machine learning and deep learning algorithms, which come mainly from autonomous driving or industrial processes, but where the processes, the software, the knowledge is now also transferred to agriculture and already shows up in the high-tech platforms of novel agricultural machinery. So these four elements, from my perspective, are the elements where we have and where we are experiencing quite some technical digital revolution. And now coming to the second part, to the scale, how do we actually link this across the scales? And there I would like to start on the really large scale, namely from satellites. And as you may know, in Europe, the European Space Agency is currently implementing a new generation of satellites, which is called the Sentinels, the Sentinel satellite, Sentinel-1 to 6, being on the way and more to be followed. And this is a new generation of satellites which give us a really novel and really high definition view on our Earth's surface from all the different components, from the soil to the plants, to the oceans, the waters, and to the atmosphere. But if we look on the whole family of what is currently in the pipeline of ESA, this is an overview of the satellites which ESA is currently implementing. There is this Copernicus branch with the Sentinel family as operational satellites. There are meteorological satellites, and there's another branch of scientifically driven satellites which explore new technologies, new measurement modes for the future. And if I, for example, look at the newest member of this family, the FLEX satellite, this is a satellite which is currently being implemented to be launched 2023-24. And this satellite is specifically geared towards measuring photosynthetic activity of our vegetation to provide physiological indicator for vegetation health status or stress. And if you can see, one target region is really down to agriculture. However, what is also meant is that this satellite will only achieve a resolution of 300 by 300 meters pixel resolution in the revisiting time of a few weeks. So at the end, even though this satellite aims to measure photosynthesis as the indicator, an online indicator for threats on vegetation, and to also provide input for our sustainable agricultural production. And this figure actually is taken from the satellite mission, so not from a bioeconomy presentation, but this is really actually taken from the ESA documents. Nevertheless, the targets are the same, photosynthesis as the central indicator to be measured from space for plant production. We are still facing the problem of the resolution of such a satellite mission. And for this, I would like slowly come down and think about how do we actually come down to the scale which are important for farmers, for the end users. One part is to move down using aircrafts. One picture of our research where we have a demonstrator of the satellite mission being implemented in an aircraft, measuring according to the same measurement principle as the future satellite mission. And by this, we can already get down to the resolution of a few meters, resolving photosynthetic efficiency, really for actual photosynthesis on the scale of single fields and below the Forschungszentrum Jülich with a open pit mining in this area, and this diverse agricultural system where every field, depending on the farmer's practice and the seasonal cycle, have different photosynthetic efficiency at the time of the overpass. And if we do some further image processing with the aircraft sensor, we can also move down the inside single fields. This is an image of the agricultural research campus Klein-Altendorf of Bonn University, where you can actually see the experimental plots of the science campus. And by some image processing, we can move down barely to the size of experimental plots, which have a resolution of a few meters. But this is then most likely the limitation which we can achieve with aircraft sensors. And this is then, from my perspective, where, coming back to the beginning of our talk, where then the next platforms, UAVs and ground-based systems will come in to close this gap and really to scale down to the elements which we want to detect, namely early detection of stresses, of pests, and so on. So this was my last slide. From my perspective, there's a lot of technology development happening in all the different scales. However, the challenge for our future, I think, is really to now smartly link those different scales, which do not exclude each other. However, the smart modular linking of these different elements from satellite data, which are free, globally accessible, but still have the limited resolution, with aircraft data, which are an expensive product, but most likely still can provide relevant information for dedicated use on the intermittent scale. To use the capabilities of drones and unmanned aircraft as cheap and versatile platforms down to the point measurements from the tractor, or in the easiest way from the handheld smartphone application. And to link these elements, I think if we are doing this clever, this could be really the game changer in our digital agriculture for the future. With this, I think I'm at the end of my time. Of course, this is all a lot of international collaboration, and already David mentioned the networks on phenotyping, but there's also international networks to bring the remote sensing, proximity sensing capacities together on the national but also international level. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to a discussion, and I hope that I have sparked some ideas with this. Thanks, Roland, back to you.
Thanks, Uwe. Thanks a lot. Thanks to the speakers for keeping the time. Now we have about half an hour for an open discussion. And so, Michelle, David, may I ask you also to turn on your video and basically start the discussion? So what we started, we prepared a set of few guiding questions, which you should be able now. So I would like to share the questions basically with all the participants so that you can see what questions we would try to address, and encourage all the participants to put also your questions into the chat. So I'm pretty sure there will be time also to address questions from the audience. But as such, we've seen there is lots of challenges below ground, using data in a useful way, addressing different scales. And as such, the first question would be, which is actually already on the screen, to all three speakers, complementary topics from your perspectives. What would be the game-changing technologies that will guide agriculture in the next 20 years? Should we start with Michelle? Would you like to start and basically address the game-changing technologies in the next 20 years?
Yeah, so as you saw from my talk, I really feel that there is a very big gap in not being able to quantify biomass below ground. This has implications for carbon sequestration measurements, political decisions to offset carbon with knowledge of carbon below ground. It has implications for understanding nitrogen capture by root systems below ground, and ameliorating that way. And also, as I mentioned, when we are modeling and looking for gains in carbon use efficiency or resource use efficiency by plants, we don't have approximately 50% of the plant estimated in those values. And yeah, I think we're really operating in the dark by always saying that above ground measurements tell us what's below ground.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Maybe Uwe, right now when addressing these technologies, but also game-changing technologies, but this question above, below ground, what's your opinion?
Yeah, thanks, Roland. I totally agree with Michelle that I'm confident that your soil scientists will manage to look below ground and to see the roots and the whole biome below ground in the next years. This is definitely one technology. A second one where I'm pretty confident that this will be a key player is coming from data sciences. So when I currently observe what machine learning, artificial intelligence are developing on algorithms which are robust and also fast, enabling online data analysis, I'm pretty astonished. So years ago, we were still, well, could keep up with all neural networks with our physical models, but this machine learning approaches, I think, will surprise us not only in the next years. The problem is still that these data will need a lot of training to be universally applicable on the different fields in the diversity of our agricultural production systems. If you already think about how much effort goes into detect passengers from autonomous driving, how complicated it will be to detect diseases, the magnitude of diseases in the different agricultural production systems. So this is still a long way, but I would say this machine learning technologies will be a game changer in the future.
David, what would be for you the game-changing technology? May I ask you to briefly address that?
Yeah, I'm agree with Michelle and Uwe, especially in Uwe's talk he mentioned the SIF, solar-induced chlorophyll fluorescence. For me, I think those technologies which can detect the plant physiological states or forecasting the pathological states may play a very important role in the next 20 years. We all know that we have such kind of sensors. For example, we have half spectral cameras, multispectral cameras, chlorophyll fluorometers. But for half spectral, we know it's really powerful, but the data is really big, and we still lack a very mature, very good algorithms which can be widely used. This is a very big limitation. The big data processing pipeline, especially with the help of machine learning, may help to figure it out in next 10 years or 20 years.
Okay, thanks a lot. Then moving on to the next questions, what would be the main obstacles that you see for those technologies to be effective? Uwe, should we start this time with you?
Sure. One obstacle could be, from my perspective, protectionism on all different levels. So if I was making the point in terms of, like, I think the different data streams, the different technologies have to be shared between the different players across scales, and I hope that actually we can come up to a really an open source, open user environment where data, software, and knowledge is shared. And I'm hoping that not only isolated high-tech solutions, which are closed solutions, will be there in the future, especially to transfer this to non-industrialized countries. I think this open sharing of technology software is really important from my side.
Would you, David?
Sorry,
Are we going clockwise? Or?
Would you, Michelle, address this question, the major obstacles?
Actually, I'm incredibly optimistic about the area of digital agriculture, basically because I think younger generations are very stimulated by these technologies. And I know what Uwe and David are talking about as well, but having, I guess, become involved a lot more in university teaching now for the first time, I really think it's an area that there are many aspects to it that are open source, many. the robotics, the sensor, the computational area, and in some ways it's just the imagination. I see a lot of exciting opportunities in this area. It's more accessible than the genomic revolution, in my view.
Okay, thanks a lot. David, would you also?
In my mind, the main obstacle would be price, the cost. So even though we have the technology, and actually we have some nice technology already there, but can it be used widely? This is one of the biggest questions we need to face. One of the biggest challenges is most of the technology are still too expensive to be widely used by the farmers. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Before moving to the next questions, I would like to use the opportunity that we have representatives from the industry and academia and sneak in a question from the audience. So there is a question from Anna Soik about how big is the actual gap between industry and research-driven approaches in this area of digitalization of agriculture. So what's your opinion on this industry and academia-driven approaches to use technology, to use digitalization, to advance agriculture? Should we start this time? Michelle, would you like to start?
I think that's a hard question because I'm not in private industry, and it can be hard to know what is going on in private industry. So I really don't know what that gap is. It could potentially be quite large, actually. But on the other hand, based on the answer to my previous question, I don't believe all of what we're talking about here is expensive and big and flying around on a satellite. You know, we can be talking about possibly 3D printing and designing. Some aspects are very accessible, but I would imagine the gap between industry and research, it's probably large, but maybe Uwe and David can comment.
The gap, I think, it's really hard to see. The gap do existed. How to say that for industry, when we do commercialization and technology, the technology must be very well developed and can be used by everybody. So it may be not very, in some kind, it may be not very high tech, not very complex, but must be very reliable. In academia, the scientists are doing really nice research works. They can develop very high advanced technologies and publish papers, but how to transfer these technologies into commercialized products, it will cost a rather longer time. So in technology side, it's okay, we achieved, but in industry side, it's not ready. So with my experience, I found the gap is quite big. It may cost many years to make the already existed technology to be commercialized. So if we can find some way to short this process, the other side, we are promoting the digitalization of agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Uwe, yep.
Yeah, maybe some thoughts from my part. I agree. The big and difficult question I think actually we do not have a big gap in the classical mode between industry and academia, because at the current, which I'm experiencing, is that in research projects, in development of new technologies, both partners from academia and from industry are actually working together in joint projects. And maybe this is also one of the big achievements of the fact that we have bioeconomy as a research and an innovation topic being recognized, because there really the researchers go out of their ivory tower and we work together and we directly sit together with the industrial partners within the same projects. So this is actually a big achievement, I would say, and there on your question, Anna, I think this was a great step forward to not have a big gap. The next thing is, however, how to bring then efficiently new technologies, innovation to the market. Where do we as a researcher stop, and where does industry really take over in the bringing then the things to the market? This is something where I think a lot of concepts were also developed in the framework of the bioeconomy, and this again is something where if I can pose a wish, I would wish that the pre-competitive level where industries are not in competition yet, that this level is being as big and as wide as possible, that we can really work together with all the actors before then the competition and the acknowledged interests of the single players in the market come in. So this would be my wish, to have this pre-competitive market as wide as possible.
Okay, thanks a lot. Then I would suggest we move on to the next questions, which partly addresses already issues that you already mentioned about this low-cost, high and low-cost technology for agriculture. So are there any differences? And I think this question already applies that most likely there are some between innovation aspects in high and low technology agriculture. How can they be addressed? David, would you like to start?
Okay, yes, they do have differences between the high-tech and low-tech agriculture. From my mind, most of the high-tech agriculture existed in the wealthy countries. The rich countries can invest a lot of money, and they can implement the high technologies into big machineries or robots. And they do not need to care about the investment, because the farm is very big. You can use in the robots or machines to replace the laborers. But in low-tech agriculture, especially in the developing countries, they may do not have enough money for the investment, and they need affordable technologies. And also, for example, in China, we do not have so much big farms like in US. We only have we do have big farms in some provinces, but in most of the regions of China, the farm is really small. And many farms exist located in mountains, in valleys. So the big machine cannot work well in these small farms. So which means some high-tech machine cannot be used here. So how can we find a right way, a right technology to use here is also a problem. So we do have a big differences between different technology or between different countries.
Thanks a lot. Michelle, would you continue? Would you like to continue?
Yeah, I would just really like to agree with David that I think one of the differentials of the technologies is farm size. That's really, really critical. because in Australia we have the opposite situation. We have very, very big broadacre farms. And I think the key there, though, it's not that these farmers are wealthy, it's that their margins become very, very small, but need to be effective over a very large area. So they are using these technologies potentially in a, well, they're using different technologies, likely, maybe in a slightly different way to smallholder farmers, but I think I think the farming size and the operation will be a key driver of the type of technology, but there will be some underlying similarities, probably centered around the mobile phone.
Mm. Thank you, Uwe.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree to the farm size and the different management practices raised by you both. And the other thing, of course, is when we are talking about a technology-driven field, that it's totally illusionary to assume that this high-tech, expensive technology which we develop in the industrial countries can be transferred to developing or emerging countries. So what we are currently doing is we try to also actively make the big jump and work together with people where agriculture is in a change, where agriculture is still on a poor side. So we have, for example, projects in Nigeria, and I can tell you a lot of stories where we totally failed with our naive approach to take our high-tech sensors into the farming systems into Nigeria. There are hundreds of possibilities why this can be doomed. And how to overcome this? I don't have a master plan. Besides that, I think from the early on should try to work there internationally, invite the partners from the other countries to work with the industrial countries, and also vice versa, to make the early steps and to transfer our technology or our smart concepts into those countries. Even though it's sometimes hard, it needs to totally different thinking. But I think this early working internationally together, from my perspective, is at the moment the only way I can see to actually overcome this definitely problem.
Okay, thank you, Uwe. That would be your last sentence would be the transition to the next question. So we talked right now about game-changing technology, obstacles, industry interaction, low-tech, high-tech solutions. What do you think is the role or of infrastructure networking approaches to support this innovation? So what do we need to do to develop networks for networking, to bring the solutions, to develop these solutions, and how should they be developed in the future? So what is your opinion on that? Who would like to start? Michelle, would you like to start?
Well, I think I'm going to hand over maybe to David. I think but just briefly, the international plant phenotyping networks that have been established by Uli Schur and European colleagues, and now globally, these really let a lot of people be involved very quickly in technologies. So I think that is really something to be fostered. But I'll pass to David as someone in China to talk much more on this, I think.
Yes, I agree with you. IPPN doing very well in this side. IPPN networking with most of the phenotyping players all over the world. Really nice job. And also, if we are talking about the infrastructures, I think Emphasis doing the best job in Europe, because you make almost all the big infrastructures together and offer opportunities of accessible opportunities to a lot of scientists. While I still want to talk something about China. If we talk about China, we found that networking is fine in recent years, because more and more people began to talk about plant phenotyping, digital agriculture, smart agriculture. But we also have quite some infrastructures, but almost all these infrastructures are built for that organizations themselves. We do not have some kind of strategy or network-like emphasis to do that, which means there are a lot of scientists or big breeding companies. They have the request, they want to do experiment in big infrastructures, but they do not have the opportunity because they cannot build those infrastructures themselves. So how to make the organizations or scientists and also the industries more open, how to work more closely is a big question, is a big challenge in future years. If we want to do better, we need to work more closely. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I may follow up, and I go in the same line as the last question, which was just posed in the chat. I would also say there's a lot of things which can be learned and synergies which can be exploited if we move closer to the remote sensing and Earth observation community. This community has already managed to provide satellite data globally on platforms. I'm talking about Google Earth now, where you don't even realize the seemingly interplay and interlink of data sources from aircrafts, from different satellites, where you can zoom in the small scale out to the globe, and you don't even realize how the different data are actually linked. And with this community, which has a lot of experience of actually working internationally, making data available internationally, also in low-tech countries, I think there are already talks ongoing and started, and the example which was just posted in the chat is one good example of where this communication has been started. But I think this would be a field where we actually can exploit much more by linking these two communities who have just started to talk to each other.
Thanks, Uwe. And the question also in the chat is it addresses European Commission, so which also would lead to the next question about political constraints. So it would be very much interested about you. So when we have networks, we have technology. Do we need also support on the one hand from the policy sides? But do you see constraints, opportunities, how policy could support these developments on basically all those different levels, from networking to technology development to technology application? David, would you like to start?
Okay. Yes. In our country, the government release, they call it a State Council #1 document every January. In past almost 20 years, the State Council #1 document always have the topic of agriculture, which means the government really pay attention to the innovation-driven agriculture. But in other aspects, most of the content in that document is coming top-down. And there are some guidelines to the state-affiliated research organizations. So the government do not pay so much attention on the private companies, private enterprises. While I think the private players, they have much more innovation power than the state-affiliated organizations in China. So we can say that the trend is very well, but the strategy maybe need to adjust a little bit. If we go back to digital agriculture or smart agriculture, I found in past almost 20 years in China, most of the players were coming from remote sensing or agriculture information field. Most of them, they have very nice background in remote sensing, in information technology, but they are not very well in plant science or agronomy itself. So we need to have more agronomy scientists to be involved in this way, because we are talking about agriculture, talking about plant is plant. So we want to resolve the questions generated by plant. So I think we do have the opportunities. We do have more and more opportunities for innovation in agriculture.
Thanks a lot. Uwe?
Yep, maybe quick answer as we're coming to the end. One constraint which I currently see is, especially in Europe, is the question who is allowed to look on a farmer's field, and are we allowed to use data from a private or privately used field publicly? This is something at the moment I see a constraint in this. How can we make data freely available? And there I would also advocate to have a free look of the whole society on our also managed agricultural systems.
I completely agree with Uwe. I think the power and the value here is the data, and the governments have a strong role in the accessibility of data and managing that accordingly. With genetic resources, we have a history now of not sharing, and that we have lessons to learn there. And I think the data value needs to be understood. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, Michelle. Looking at the time, we have already 10 o'clock. So I suppose there is one question in the chat, but I don't know if we have time to address this final question. If you agree, then I would go just for a very short comment. It's actually an interesting question about which technologies will be accessible and easily usable by small farmers. So there is within the next 20 years, there is this concern that on the one hand, there is this high-tech technologies which are available either by large agro businesses, on the other hand by institutions developing novel solutions, but how could they benefit for the small farmers? Very short statements, please. Michelle, would you like to start?
Well, for me, I think already the use of soil sensors with a recording on a mobile phone, it's available, it can be deployed, and the ability to know when and how much to water would just add enormous value and resource saving to global agriculture.
Yeah, I can say something. For me, I think as Michelle said, the cheap sensors and the analytical methods which can be linked to smartphone applications or technology which is already available, in combination with the access to the databases, to the potential machine learning approaches to help the farmer to identify diseases, to detect or to see early signs of nutrient limitation already from normal RGB handheld camera systems. I think this would be one of the first technological steps which we can provide or can expect.
For me, I think it's some small drones have very high potential for the smallest drones with a high resolution RGB camera, which can be used for phenotyping, it costs around 1,000 euros. So it's cheap enough to be used by farmers. What we lack is the data handling open source software. If we can find an open source software to be used by the farmers, okay, they can use the drones because the drones can fly, cover a very large scale of the farms.
Okay, looking at the time, so there are still some questions coming into the chat, but I would suggest the participants, I would forward the questions to the afternoon session. So happy to do that, forward it, and then I hope it will be addressed in the afternoon sessions. My impression is that we could continue the discussion for at least another half an hour, potentially much longer. It's an important topic, and we had experts who really could address most of those questions. There was lots of food for thoughts on technology, on digital agriculture, which is really important. So I would very much thank all the panelists for their presentation and for the discussions. So from my perspective, I really enjoyed it, and it was very enlightening, encouraging, and it makes a lot of how to look at new technologies. It's on the one hand, they are not only new technologies very exciting, but they also provide something very useful, and it's important to continue working on this in this field. So as such, thanks a lot. Thanks to all the participants, and I would like to also in the last sentence advertise for the afternoon session. So please join the afternoon sessions. The discussion will continue, and hope to see you in there. So Uli sure will moderate the next sessions. As such, thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon in the afternoon and at the coming up meetings and sessions. Thanks a lot.